Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're gonna be talking about a very good build that works from mid to late game and even beyond late game, like at the very end between level 70 to 100. But the cool thing about the build is that you can actually have it by level 40-50 and stick with it till the very end. It's a build that does not need sacred items, and because of that it is very easy to get it, to get all the right aspects, the damage, and etc, etc. Obviously later into late game you would like to create some decent synergy between vulnerability and different aspects that we're going to be using. Now with that being said, let's get right into it. Starting off with the basic attacks, we're going to be taking the meta option, which is puncture, and we're going to go ahead for fundamental puncture because it gives us that vulnerable effect. This will help us a lot, especially in the mid to late game levels, around level 50-40. If you haven't done your renown and you don't have the Paragon extra points that you get from renown, then this will definitely help you, because the first thing you want to do with your Paragon born is to get the exploit glyph, which makes enemies vulnerable after you damage them. But we're gonna touch the Paragon board topic later, but it's just something to keep in mind. So for that reason, we're gonna be taking puncture. Now we can also take invigorating strikes, especially if you're leveling up. While you're leveling up around level 30, 40, etc, perhaps you're having some issues with the energy, with your resources. So invigorating strike will definitely help you with your resources to recover them and so on. So if you feel like you're lacking resources and you're not able to use your core skills as often, then perhaps switching from puncture to invigorating strike is best till the moment you feel that you can have the right aspects, so you can use puncture more often. Now in late game though, puncture becomes almost non-existent. Now moving on to the core skills before we go into the skills, which is twisting blades. I also want to mention that it does not necessarily have to be twisting blades. You can actually make this build also with flurry and with rapid fire, but you will need two different aspects for both options. One, the flurry aspect that makes the damage go around you in a circle, and the ricochet aspect for rapid fire. But for now we're gonna stick with twisting blades, because reality, even if you're tired of looking at twisting blades builds, twisting blades is the meta, and this build is meant to be simple, easy to understand, and you don't need to think too much, right? So stick with twisting blades. Even after all the nerfs, is still the meta, the best out of all the other options. Passives, we're taking sturdy and symphonic strikes. Symphonic strikes is gonna be your the one thing that's going to keep you alive, because the synergies we're going to be focused on is critical damage and vulnerability damage. So the fact that you're going to be able to do critical strikes very often by the late game, symphonic strikes is going to be your one thing that is going to keep you alive. Is crazy. Now with that being said, it's important to take these maybe by the end of your points, right? So when you're leveling up, you don't really need this, especially if you have your items all over the place. If you don't have items that give you critical strike chance, then there's no really point of taking this. Perhaps use your points in more in other areas before you commit 3 points into symphonic strikes, because this only becomes very valuable once you go into late game, above 50, above 60, when you can actually land those critical strike chance very often. Moving on to our agility skills, we have Shadow Step and Dash. You can remove Dash if you wish to do so and add something else, for example, Concealment or Cold Traps or even Dark Shroud. You can move Dash away, but I personally like the mobility, so I keep it. And it also gives me that critical strike damage, that 15% increased critical strike damage. That is not a lot, but it's something, right? Now, the important ability here is Shadow Step, because Shadow Steps gets you out of those CC chains. It gets you out of that stun, freeze, all those little things that just stun you and end up getting you killed, especially if you're playing hardcore. This build is very good for hardcore as well. It's actually a build for a hardcore character in mind. Like, this is a build I was thinking, like, which is the simplest build I can make that works in hardcore, right? Obviously, the video I showed it earlier, when you see myself killing monsters that are 12 levels above me, is something you will never be doing in hardcore. You're gonna be killing monsters 2, maybe 3 levels above you. You don't want to really risk it, right? But with that being said, Shadow Step is your one ability that can get you out of trouble because it gives you that unstoppable. But you can, if you don't like Shadow Step, you can actually replace it for Concealment. Concealment also gives you unstoppable. So whichever you prefer. I personally prefer Shadow Step because, you know, you can jump into the other side of the enemy bunch because there's an enemy over there. You can jump to the target that has your specialization, which is going to be inner sight. We're going to be taking inner sight as our spec, right? So if you're in the middle of the fight and you need to get you to proc your inner sight, and you cannot, and you see that the little mob is right there in the on the other side of your screen over there, that inner sight, you see that little light over there, then you can use Shadow Step, jump on him, and boom, proc that inner sight passive super fast, right? So it's definitely a fun ability to use. Then we're gonna be taking Weapon Mastery. That's our passive, and we're gonna be taking Concussive because it gives us that 12% increased critical strike chance. We really want that, and that's when you knock down enemies. So moving on to our Subterfuge Skills, we're gonna be taking Poison Trap, and we are only taking like 1 point, 1 point, and 1 point, and it's only to proc our next passives and also proc the Concussive passive and the Mastery Trap passive. That's the one reason why we're taking it. The Poison Trap is not going to do any damage. It's just there to help us get that critical strike chance, do more damage, and give us some level of survivability, right? If you're in the middle of a lot of mobs and you drop a trap, you knock them down, and then also they get poisoned, and thanks to these 3 passives here, the poisoned enemies deal 15% less damage to you. You deal 12% increased poison damage to them. But really, here I have an item on my character that gives me 3 points. That's why. But I only look. I cannot remove points from it because I only place 1 point here. So don't get confused here. It says 4 points, but there in reality there's 3 points by item contribution, right? But I had to place 1 so I could place the other 2. Now we will also be taking alchemical advantage because you gain 3% increased attack speed for each enemy you poison up to 15%, which is crazy. Because on one of our aspects gives you attack speed as well, and it's really nice to be able to just attack super fast, especially with Twisting Blades. The faster you attack when your spec is on, inner sight is on, the more Twisting Blades are gonna be dancing around you, and it's just madness. It definitely works. It does very nice synergy. Okay, so yeah. So we're taking a Poison Trap. We're also gonna be taking the Exploit passive that gives us that 18% increased damage, and we're gonna be taking also that Malice passive that gives us that 9% vulnerable damage, right? Then moving to our Imbudement skills, our Imbudement option is gonna be Shadow Imbuement, because of the clear speed. Why Shadow Imbuement and no Poison Imbuement? I'm pretty sure maybe of you might come up with that question in the comment section below. It's because Shadow Imbuement has a very nice fast speed clear, like you can clear enemies super fast, especially if you use the key passive Victimize. Victimize is a great option. Right now I was using this because I was testing some stuff, but in reality is Victima's the one I was that is for here. So let me change that. I apologize. But yeah. So we're taking Shadow Imbuement because it clears through the light mobs super fast, and the critical and vulnerable damage will deal with the elites. So that's not a problem. Actually, the Paragon board, I will show you what we're picking so we can deal with the elites super fast, like elites and bosses, etc., etc. So by taking Shadow Imbuement, we go for blended Shadow Imbuement. The explosion makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds, and then we're taking Shadow Crash and consuming shadows. So when we kill an enemy, each time you kill an enemy with shadow damage, you generate 30 energy, right? So as you level up and as you get closer to late game, you start to realize that you get so many different resources of energy from your aspects and everywhere, and that's why by the level 60-70 you don't no longer really need that basic ability we were talking about earlier, Invigorating Strike, and you can move on to Puncture, right? Because you want to keep your enemies vulnerable. Anyway, we're also going to be taking Precision Imbuement because it gives us that critical strike chance, that 9% critical strike chance, which is huge. And these 3 passes here, I did explain why those. Then down here in the ultimate skills, we're going to be taking the Trap Master because it gives us that 12% critical strike chance against vulnerable and crowd control enemies, and that's what we're using Poison Trap. That's the one reason why we're having it, right? And then at the end, you got multiple options that you can take here on your key passives. One will be Victimize. Victimize does such a nice synergy with Shadow Imbuement because the explosions between Victimize and Shadow Imbuement creates like a very fun massive explosion of madness, and it's very nice to have it if you want to do a lot of AoE damage and clear dungeons super fast. And another option could be Close Quarter Combat because it increases your damage against crowd control enemies and gives you attack speed, which is super nice. And if you're playing hardcore, my pick would have been Momentum. I am currently not playing hardcore, but if I were to be playing hardcore, I would rather go for Momentum because it gives me that increased damage reduction. It increases my energy regeneration and gives me 15% increased movement speed. And this only happens when you attack enemies who from behind, because you are not stunning or dazing or freezing enemies. But the good thing is that with the Blade Dancer aspect, that is the one that you are going to be using with Twisting Blades, you hit the enemies on the back. So it procs momentum. So it works. Yeah. So that's the abilities for now. We're gonna move on to the Paragon board. Here on the Paragon board, our very first option, it's not gonna be efficacy. I have efficacy because it makes more sense to put it here than over here, which is exploit. So our first option is gonna be exploit. So, but later on, you're gonna remove exploit from here and you're gonna put it over here, right? But on your first option, when you are leveling up, level 50, if you're level 50, and you did your renown, you should be able to go all the way here in one go, and already have like this, the glyph socket unlocked, right? And then by the time you're level 55, you should already have this area completely like already with the glyph working basically. Anyway, what you want to be using is exploit, because with exploit you make enemies vulnerable, and what you want to aim for when you're reaching level 50 and above is to have your items and your modifiers. Yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about exactly, is this. You want to have your items, for example here my crossbow, have modifiers that give you vulnerable damage. For example, here this crossbow gives me 56% vulnerable damage, right? The secondary modifier that you must have as your second priority is going to be critical strike damage, whether it's with imbued skills, core skills, or stuff like that. But you really want to have critical strike damage just overall, right? Like for example, a good little piece of advice is that swords give you that modifier more often than daggers, right? So if I look at my swords here, you can see that I have 24% critical strike damage, and then on my other sword I have another 24% critical strike damage. If you look at daggers, then daggers normally give you like 30% increased damage to close enemies or stuff like that. So definitely is a better choice to go for swords than daggers for this specific build. Or So yeah, on your rings, you're gonna make sure that you get your critical strike chance, your max modifier, the highest you can. In this case, with 7.5 and 7.5 here as well. And then on your gauntlet, you also want to have the highest modifiers possible. In this case, I have 8.4, but I could have 9.8. And I if I were to upgrade it, I think it can go all the way to like 10.5 or 11%. Overall, if I look at my stats, you will see that my critical strike chance is pretty high, 38%. And if you count all the passives in the abilities, this increases, right? So if I my poison trap and I knock out enemies, that gives me a 12% increased critical strike chance that, against vulnerable enemies, right? So with the Paragon here, with efficacy and that ability, is gonna give me, I have already 38% plus 12%. That comes down to 50%, right? Did I did my maths correct, or I didn't? Anyway, and not only that, so we have that, right? And then if we look over here on the top, if we knock them down, where is it? If we knock them down, we also get another 12% increased critical strike chance, right? So we increase that percentages as high as we can, and with that we're constantly be hitting that critical strike chance super high, right? So this is important that once you reach level 50, level 60, you start searching for these modifiers. The video is getting super long, so I'm gonna try to finish up as fast as I can, and then on the description below and in the comment section below, I'm gonna leave a link to the builder GG planner build thingy, where you can just look at the aspects and everything more carefully, right? So let's go into the Paragon here real quick. So we're gonna be taking the first one that you want, like I said, is exploit. The second one that you want is gonna be combat, because it's gonna give you that critical strike damage restored 12% of the energy cost, right? So the skills that critically strike restores 12% of the energy cost. So that gets you back into your feet. You cannot continue spamming your abilities because you keep on getting your energy back. And the last one that you want to go for is efficacy, because it makes your imbuement attacks better. So your Shadow Imbuement should hit harder. With that being said, let us not forget that there is some very important things that you want. Exploit weakness, that whenever you deal damage to a vulnerable enemy, they take 1% increased damage from you for 6 seconds, up to 15%. So this is great, especially against bosses, and you start increases a lot, or elites, you start making them so much damage over time. We also get the Hunter Killer rare node that increases 32% damage to elites. Not only that, we also get another rare node over here that is called vulnerable damage, exploit vulnerable damage. And then we also get another rare node over here that increases 28% core skill damage. And then we also get another rare node over here, which is the finisher rare node that increases 28% core skill damage. So it's a very solid path so far. It does great synergy, and it's gonna make you an absolute monster. All the aspects and everything else, I'm just gonna put it on the description below so you guys can check it out. But the main thing that you want to have would be Blade Dancer, and you can put it on your crossbow because it increases the percentage by 100%, which is super good. And the other one that you really want is this one, and I forgot the name, I apologize. But what it does is that it dealing direct damage to enemies affected by your trap, which will be poison trap. It has up to 75% chance to make them vulnerable, right? In this case, I only got the 52% modifier, but if you can get the 75% chance, it is fantastic. Everything else is very straightforward. Here increases my attack speed and blah blah, but I will leave that on the link below so you can check it out. Anyway, if you made it this far, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, leave a comment if you found this helpful, and I really hope that you liked the video. All feedback is more than welcome, and please don't forget to subscribe. Also, just in a little note, tomorrow is Tarisland closed beta, and I got access into it, so I'm gonna be covering that game, so expect some videos about Tarisland tomorrow or during the week. Torres signing out. I'll see you in the next one. And yeah, bye.